Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming presented by Codename Entertainment. I'm one of your hosts, Treavor Bettis, and joining me each week is the amazing person who is...
Mitra Jordan.
Yeah.
Although amazing, I kind of demur. But anyway,
oh my gosh.
Yes, it's great to be here today, as always. Yeah, what more do we need to know about me? I think we know me.
Okay, well, there we go.
I'm a registered clinical counselor working out of Victoria, BC, and I bring the mental health to mental health.
Yes. Yeah, I bring the mental health to mental health. Put it on a shirt.
I bring the health to mental health.
Yeah, she is the professional one. I am just the host that fields questions and things.
You're the questionable one. Is that what we're calling it?
I'm the questionable one. Yeah, this week we're going to be talking about some cozy games. I think we actually have talked about this before at one point, but you know what? That was years ago now because we've been doing this show for
talking
years.
About this some more again. Yes,
it's true. It's true.
So after 3 weeks of mental health and discussing ADHD and discussing some quite serious issues, generally speaking, in terms of neurodivergence, we thought we would bring it back to something lighter and more fun, because that's actually why cozy games are important.
Yes. Well, let's start things off with how we usually do. Why are we talking about this?
We're talking about this because part of a good mental health plan or one's mental health support is having things that we can do for fun that are a rest for our minds, that are a break, a vacation, you could say, but that also have enough stimulation and interest that they are fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we all need things like that in our lives. You know, we all need hobbies, we all need crafts, we all need kind of a respite, books, all kinds of things. And in terms of games and video games, which is, we talk about the intersection of video games and mental health. So this fits right in terms of video games that sort of, in many ways, can support your mental health.
Yeah. Well, it actually, I didn't even think about this while we were doing our pre-show stuff, but you mentioned books there. Like, even in fiction, this is becoming a big thing of cozy fantasy.
Cozy fantasy, cozy mysteries, cozy romance, absolutely. Where there is an absence of major conflict.
Yeah.
Is really, I think, a big piece of it. So that where you are kind of assured of a happy ending in some way. There was a time when people really sneered at the idea of kind of romance as part of literature. But let's just think for a second about Jane Austen, about Pride and Prejudice, about why is Bridgerton so popular right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's being assured of a happy ending. Why do we always like sitcoms? Why do people gravitate towards comedy? Because it lightens the heart.
Yeah.
And cozy games kind of hold that space in terms of the variations in the video game genre. And, you know, there's a lot of cozy board games as well. We don't tend to talk about that much because we talk about video games. But just to say, a lot of genres have cozy genre within them.
Yeah. Yeah, not everything has to be the edge of your seats, you know, blockbuster of the year, big explosions everywhere kind of thing. Um,
Exactly.
and I mean, like, it's one of those things because, like, as a teenager and stuff, like, that was the stuff that I craved. Like, I was playing Halo 2 all the time, and like, going to see, horror movies and stuff like that. And like, I did eventually hit a spot where I was just like, like, everything's kind of terrible around the world as it is. Like, maybe I just need something that is less. And funny enough, like, we're gonna get into talking about it, but like, that is when I found Animal Crossing, and I didn't even know these sort of games existed.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that particularly because I think that while there have always been cozy games, I think there was a massive explosion around Animal Crossing's popularity in particular because it happened to coincide with the beginning of the pandemic. And it is no surprise from a mental health standpoint that we see a, a larger kind of broader interest in something that's going to be that soothing um, when we're also at our most anxious.
Yeah.
So you can see kind of a rise in both things
Yeah.
sometimes. So you'll see a rise in maybe more horror or maybe kind of because games and fantasy and stories and books and media in general can also help us deal with some pretty difficult and traumatic matters. But as a piece of that, there's only so much that we can attend to before it really exhausts us. And so having a respite that kind of engages our mind, that acts as a healthy or a fun distraction that is not the same. And we did an episode on distraction and avoidance way back when. So it's not the same as avoiding, although it can be, but it's about taking a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference between, like, like, oh, I'm so mad at the day, I'm just gonna, play Call of Duty all night and just, shoot guns off and everything, then just be like, I had a really stressful day. I'm gonna go plant some crops and talk to some nice people in town.
Yeah. And so I think for some people, both are you in fact for many of us both are useful.
Yeah.
I certainly remember times, particularly when I was training as a therapist and kind of coming across through agency work some pretty tough situations. I did want to come home, play World of Warcraft and blast all the baddies and heal all the people in the dungeon, and all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff was really helpful to my learning process at the time. And sometimes you just want to gather some herbs.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean,
yeah.
literally recently, I think it was last week or something, I was sitting on the couch looking at games to play, and I just eventually went, no, I just need to mindlessly shoot some aliens for a while. And I put on Destiny, and I played that for a couple hours and completely zoned out. Like, it's interesting because, like, it was a break, but it was like a full mental break where it's like, I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing. This is something that I have played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. And it's just muscle memory for me now.
Yeah.
But there's a difference there between, like, when I get the itch to start a new farm in Stardew Valley, or when I'm like, oh man, you know what sounds great? Starting a new Minecraft save and putting it on peaceful. Like those are definitely different things from different stress relievers for me. It depends on the stress that I'm having at the time.
Absolutely. So what we came across was there are many definitions for what a cozy game is. And we often start our discussions here on why are we talking about this, and then go into a definition. So there are games that larger sandbox MMORPGs, for example, World of Warcraft, aren't what I would call a cozy game at all. But interestingly enough, they do have some cozy elements sometimes. And so cozy games kind of harness that part, and that's what the game is mostly about. So within broader games, there might be mini games, there might be some cozy or heartwarming or wholesome elements that we are drawn to. But more broadly, we're looking at games that specifically talk about that. So
real
what
quick,
we came to,
you made me remember talking about MMOs with Warcraft and everything. My big MMO back when I was a teenager was Star Wars Galaxies, and I just remembered, like, in that game you could have vocations where, like, you didn't level up by going out and fighting the Imperials and everything like that. You leveled up by having a nice shop on Naboo where you were selling like some good items that maybe you've traded for it, everything. Like, you didn't even have to touch the combat or anything like that. You could have a profession where your whole thing was like, I'm a dancer, I'm a store vendor and stuff like that, and people loved that sort of thing. And it confused me at the time. I'm like, but why would you want to do that? Because my focus was on the fighting. And now I think back, I'm like, I wish I could go back to that game and just be a vendor on Naboo. That sounds so nice.
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly it. Like, broadly, certain games speak to certain elements of like um, battling or high fantasy in some ways, where it's often conflict based, but there's always going to be some players who want a mix of both. So many more broad sandbox type games will contain some cozy elements, and some players will be drawn to those more than others. Um, and so we're talking about often smaller games that very specifically focus on these cozy aspects. So let's talk a little bit about, we made a little list of what those cozy
Yeah.
aspects were. So a big one is comfort, warmth, and relaxation. So within the game, there's usually a sense of safety, a sense of warmth, and perhaps a sense of what I'm going to call wholesomeness. So generally a feeling of a world that feels kind of nothing bad is going to happen here, you know? Or I can control the circumstances enough that I don't need to engage in anything conflict related. So they're peaceful. Low to moderate energy games, so they're not particularly engaging stress. Now, that doesn't mean that in some of them are quite narrative driven, and the narrative aspect of some of those games might bring up some stress. But that's kind of where you're enjoying a story so much, say it's a romance, and you just want to keep reading to see what happens.
Yeah.
So there often is a narrative element in these games, although not always. I would argue Animal Crossing doesn't have much of a narrative element, for example. Each of your villagers sort of comes from their own particular genre, whether they're the big sister villager or but really, they're pretty interchangeable in a lot of ways. The narrative is created by your engagement with the game and the reasons you play it, more than the narrative within the game. So, cozy games tend to be forgiving to the player. We talked about there's low stakes. So if there's rarely any death, for example, and if there is, there's pretty quick resurrection. Many people will include Pokemon. We did talk about this, actually. I see it in the chat, as an example of cozy games. Because the battling really it's not a big deal if you lose. You know what I mean? Maybe you need to do some other things to evolve your Pokemon or whatever, but it's really not a high stakes kind of thing. So that's the defining piece, is that it's not high stakes, it's fun. It often does actually have collection or collecting elements.
The collecting things is definitely one of those that's like even as a kid, like playing Pokemon Red version, like there were days where like I was going through that I wasn't even battling people or anything. Like I was like, okay, I need to get this I hate that I remember. I was like, oh no, it wasn't Electro, because that one, or Electabuzz, that one wasn't in Red version. I was like, I'm specifically going after this one Pokemon because I want to complete my collection and everything, and that was my day as a 9-year-old.
So there's always these growth elements.
Yeah.
So it's building, crafting, gathering, planting. You're growing things. You're building something. You're accumulating stuff. So Animal Crossing is big for collecting stuff. For example, you can collect lots of different outfits if that's your thing.
Museum.
The museum, exactly. So and you're building. And I think one of the things that actually, to me, it's a bit of a shame about Animal Crossing is that there wasn't a sort of, once you're done the quests that build your island, there's not, after that, it's really just about the collecting. There's no other questing. So, of course, many games do continue to have questing. We talked a bit about Cozy Grove,
Mm-hmm.
which has quests where you uncover the narrative of the other of the bears on the island, and their stories. And some of those are really, really moving, which I think is also often a feature of cozy games, can be this sort of moving, human, emotional. And again, we're talking about that warmth and that wholesomeness
Yeah.
that is often an aspect of these games. Mm-hmm.
We've actually, I love it, chat, because you're actually ahead of me on this. I was planning on saying like I want to hear what some of y'all's games are, but people are already putting
Mm-hmm.
them in the chat.
Lovely.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I believe this is Mars as the moderator right now. I say Dwarf Fortress is certainly another
Yay.
cozy game for my brain. Totally get that. It's one where you can just set it and forget it and watch them do stuff. Caleb Marin says mine are best fiends. Oh, I have to look this up. And Disney Magic
Oh, that sounds
Kingdoms.
great.
I know V Muse is a huge fan of Disney Magic Kingdoms. Or is that it? It's the no, Disney Dreamlight. That's the one that she loves. And Caleb Marin also says, and Legos, can Lego games be considered a cozy game? Have you played any of the Lego games?
No, but I've watched them being played
It,
by family members, and I would agree. I think that this is where it gets really subjective for people. And I think that's an important aspect of
yeah,
this, right? My cozy game might not be yours. Is it evoking feelings of warmth, safety, maybe nostalgia if it's Lego,
yeah.
right? That's a piece of it. And does it feel like it's wholesome for you? Yeah, then it's your cozy game. And so I think that there isn't a sort of, there's some definitions, but there's not what I would call a definitive
Yeah.
list, right? So
I mean, we even put we had definition, and we put more of a scale than a definition,
yeah,
and this is something that I brought up before the show, is that like it's one of those rare genres of video games that is a little bit more subjective than, like, if you say this is an FPS. People know what that is. This is an RPG. People have a pretty good idea what that is. Well, that one is definitely more broad now, but like folks have an idea of what that's going to be like. Like I think I said, like the closest I could think of was like an adventure game. Like adventure game as a genre is very broad, and while people do put that as a description for things, it is kind of up to folks whether they're like, yeah, this was an adventure game for me, or whether this was something else. Cozy game is really one of those things that games that I was even like, oh, this is one of my favorite cozy games. We went and looked it up on Steam, didn't even have it as the tag. Wasn't
yeah,
even categorized as that, but for me, that was a cozy game. It's a
yeah.
very interesting genre to have.
It really is, because it kind of, there's this whole scale, not scale in this case, actually. There's games that are really small, minor, maybe just on mobile or something that you don't even think of. But I'm thinking here about Neko Atsume, for anybody who's played it, is a game where you try to attract cats to your backyard. And
Best
you can do
description
it
ever.
quite slowly and not pay much in game, or you can buy things to add to your backyard, so you can get cat trees and cat toys and things, and then you get more cats in your backyard, and that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So cozy games can be like that, where they're just, they're really a small game. Cats and Soup is another one. Often
Said that like
cats,
4
guys, by the
times
way.
today. You said the name of that game like 4 times, and it's made me laugh every time.
I know, right? You make the cat soup, they bring you, I don't know, it's really cute.
So good.
So yeah, so they are kind of a 5-minute respite sometimes in those instances, or they're a longer, broader scale narrative, a game like Unpacking, for example.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what? That brings. Why don't we go through what because we each made a list. Chad, if you want to keep putting in cozy games that you like, go ahead and put them in there. But Mitra, let's start off with yours. What do you got?
Uh, so I'm not looking at the show notes at the moment.
Oh! Here, tell you what. I can
My
make this
fault,
easier
my
for you.
fault.
I'll put it
Yeah.
into the Zoom chat for you. Oh, that
Yay.
may have moved things real quick.
No, no.
Apologies. There
How
we go.
about you? I've got a few written down here that
Okay.
I consider my favorite, so it's totally fine. So one of the ones I recently watched was or played and kind of followed along with the narrative is a game that won the BAFTAs called Venba.
Mm.
And Venba is about a family that moves. They're an immigrant family. They moved from South India to Canada
Mm.
in this story. Yeah. And it's about their journey as a family and the way we show love through food. And so it's about the making of traditional South Indian dishes. And there's a puzzle element that's a bit like unpacking in terms of the order in which you add ingredients. But it's really about the story of this immigrant family and some of the challenges of life as an immigrant, your reasons for leaving your homeland, your fears and your hopes. And I found it super moving as a child of immigrants myself. I cried at
Oh
one
yeah.
point through it.
Sure.
But it was not sad tears so much as feeling seen in some ways, right?
Mm.
Feeling understood in the game. And I think that is a beautiful aspect that cozy games can bring,
Yeah.
a kind of affirmation or validation of our experiences. Um, so for instance, unpacking can bring up both joy and grief and a kind of broad-based understanding of a life process of both.
That game was absolutely wild to me because like I got it under under the review of like it's a cozy game. Like you're just unpacking things. And there I'm not gonna spoil what it is, but there was a moment in this game where, and for folks who don't know, literally this game is an isometric game. You're looking at a room and you have boxes and you're clicking on it to pull stuff out and you're just placing the items where you think they should go. And things do have like a specific room that they need to go in or something like that. Also, some of the best sound design I've heard in a game, like setting a cup down on the counter just sounded so good. I
Yeah,
loved it.
yeah,
But there was legitimately a moment in this game where I'm just having a nice relaxing time going through and putting stuff out that like I gasped and like I was like, "Oh, I was devastated for a moment of like I did not expect this emotional response from a game about just unpacking things."
yeah.
And my wife I think has played through it about 3 times. Like it's just so good.
It really is. It's quite lovely, and you certainly do get a lot out of it. Um, and I think that it speaks to an experience most of us, particularly as adults who may have moved a bit, have had in terms of the different stages in your life and the growth process that comes with those stages and the realizations that come with them. And so it's kind of, about that. It allows some introspection as well as just the narrative and the enjoyment in that narrative, as
Mhm.
well as the puzzle element. So, yeah. So I think that I think Governor Explosion just said, in terms of games I find comforting because I can get out my aggression after a hard day. 100%. I wouldn't call that a cozy game, but I would call that a necessary aspect of
Yeah.
getting on with your day. Like for me, as I said, especially when I was training, seen some hard stuff, being able to go into WoW and shoot a few things and just kind of get that aggression out was so important. And
Mhm.
this is more about kind of um, just cuddling up with a blanket, being feeling safe and warm.
Yeah.
So it's a different need, but it's both needs are really important in a person's life for
Mhm.
sure. So it can be very comforting to be able to get out your aggressions, and then it might also be fun after that
Yeah.
to get to curl up with a relaxing novel or a
Yeah.
show or a game.
Well, like
Yeah,
at the end of the day, like video games are about escapism, and it is the type of escapism that you might need or that your mental health really needs for that moment.
I think one of the beautiful things about games generally is being able to dive into a world other than our own, to leave our world behind and to engage more fully with a story. And this is also where cozy games can very much deliver. Around the time of the pandemic, as we said, it's no surprise that Animal Crossing became so popular. The idea of an island where our friends and family could visit and hang out and maybe plant things together or water our flowers, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Being able to do things like bug off, being able to run around in a world when you can't see people
Yeah.
in your real life, that was a really big thing. So the social aspect of cozy games, whether it's engaging with the inhabitants of Stardew Valley, or whether it's being able to have our real life game friends play with us, or even our online friends play with us, like that's an aspect of it too. Some cozy games are one player games. They might be multiplayer, but they have a one player mode. Some of them don't do multiplayer as well as I would like, and I would argue Animal Crossing is one of those. I would love someone. I always wanted someone to come over and help redecorate my house
Yeah.
with me, but you can't redecorate when a friend is over.
Yeah.
That's just a thing. So that I always thought was kind of a shame, but there it is.
Well,
So
something I wanted to touch on there, because like, you know, we have it later in the thing, but the some of these games like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley and stuff do have this community that pop up around it, that I
yeah,
think is another really nice aspect of it. I know specifically Stardew Valley has like a big mod community, and it's not even like, you know, like they're adding like, you know, stressful things or anything. If anything, they're adding more things to it to make the game even cozier. Where it's just like, oh, we made it so that the lighting's a little bit different. It's got more of a fall vibe to it now. Or we've made it so that, you know, you can have all these different kinds of pets more than just a dog or a cat, because, you know, that's what you want to have around you. So I think an interesting aspect that can come up from these, and that's very optional because they're not part of the game. Like they're not, you know, multiplayer isn't even in, well, I'm not gonna say it for sure. I don't know if online multiplayer is on Stardew Valley, but it's it is something that you can find a comforting community with as well, that I think is really nice.
yeah, I think when I think about that, I think about many of the Minecraft mods. Minecraft had a very big mod community, and has, I think, still. And also, if you play in creative mode, like, people have built astonishing
Oh yeah.
things in Minecraft.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I remember way back when someone built Minas Tirith in Minecraft.
Yeah.
That's stunning, right? And so that there's aspects of cozy gaming in that, in the sense that there's a flow process around creativity. Games that really encourage creativity in that way often bring out those cozy elements. And then also, if we have a community around it that is also curious and is also building and all of that, that's something that we share, and that's creating that sort of fun community together where it's encouraging people to craft in different ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting about inventory management. 100% agree. I think that one of the happiest days for a lot of people in Animal Crossing was when they doubled the amount of inventory you
Yeah.
could keep and made inventory management easier, because it's a big part of collecting.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of feeling, I think, for a lot of people, a sense of plenty. And that's a sense we like to have in real life in terms of feeling secure. You know, when you've done a grocery shop and your pantry is full, you feel pretty good, you know?
Yeah.
And when you're in game and you have lots of reagents to make stuff, or you've collected a lot of herbs, or it gives you that same sense of being replete, being safe,
Yeah.
having plenty. So it's not surprising that it comes out like that. Yeah.
Do you have any other games on your list that you wanted to bring
Uh,
up?
yeah, I've got Fae Farm, which is has a which is super cute,
It's very
right? That the
adorable.
art style, and I think that's a piece of this as well. And it's definitely a cozy game. I've only just started playing Fae Farm and Wildflowers, so I can't say terribly much about them, but there's the art style, the feel, and the sort of environment there. Definitely, you can kind of sink into it, and it's a great deal of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Another game I've been playing, I actually quite enjoy puzzle games. So we talked a little bit about June's Journey.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of puzzle mystery game in that it's a hidden objects game. You find the objects and you start to solve the mystery. And it's set in the 1920s, so it's got that really beautiful aesthetic around fashion and items. And I think that, again, even though it's by no means our generation, or generations, there's that nostalgia around these games that are set in a different time.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite fun and compelling. So,
yeah.
What about you?
So
other ones you wanted to mention?
So my list, I put Stardew Valley on here because while it's not a game that I have finished, which is still wild to me that there is a way to finish that game, it's one that like I've gone back to countless times because it is kind of the cozy game for me, of like, you know, when people ask for an example of it, that and Animal Crossing is definitely what comes to mind. My wife is a huge fan of it. She's played so much. We have we have some of the guides that what I can't remember, Fangamer has made, and they're like nice hardcover ones and everything. She did want me to mention, by the way, chat, that the creator of that game is making another game called Haunted Chocolatier that she's extremely excited about, and wanted folks to know about in case they hadn't heard about it. The one that I am very, very in love with right now is a game that recently came out called Rusty's Retirement. This is a game that I don't even remember how I ended up hearing about it, but it's on Steam. It takes up the bottom third of your monitor. And you can scroll this way and that, and you can actually have it vertical as well. And you just build out a farm, and these adorable robots, one of them is the titular Rusty, go around and do the farming, and like they plant crops and they turn them into biofuel that allows you to make more things, and you can have more people show up that can make decorations and everything. It is a very, very fun game that it's one of those where it's so silly because it's just aesthetically pleasing to look over at the screen and seeing stuff happening, and I'm not specifically interacting with it. I'm probably writing or working on a project or something, but the way that it's just there and working and everything, it's very calming and relaxing.
Yeah, I think so. I think what you're speaking to here is there are so many cozy games that have farming elements, and it's not a surprise. Again, with the growing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I joked to you before the show about those, like there's characters back in old movies are just like, I'm just gonna get away from everything. I'm just gonna go buy a farm and get away from all of this stress, and which you pointed out is not how farms work.
At all. So that's where the fantasy element of this really comes in. It would be stressful to actually run a farm. It would also be stressful to actually run a restaurant. As someone who trained as a chef and worked in a restaurant, many restaurants, I can tell you, but there are also a lot of cooking sim games. Yeah. And there are a lot of cafes and bakery type sim games, many of which I think would kind of fit in under cozy / a bit stressful, but for a lot of people, mostly cozy, right? Mm-hmm. Depending, because once again, the stakes aren't high and you get to try again if you screw up, which is, of course, not something that reality allows you to do. A failed cafe is a failed cafe, right? Or restaurant. But I think that that's a big piece of it, is that the consequences are super low, so we can engage in something and play. And we've talked a lot about the psychology of play and creativity, where the consequences of our actions needs to be low, whereas the learning is high. Mm-hmm. So we can learn, we can improve, we can grow, but failure doesn't matter. And that's how learning really happens, with this sense of play versus stress. Mm-hmm. So stress low, play high.
Well, one of them that I had on my list that definitely is like I think it's one of them that people are gonna raise a brow to, and you even did when you watched the trailer. Was Dredge.
Oh, yeah.
It is this game that is like, it is Lovecraftian inspired. There are like monsters and stuff in it, but like the premise of the game is you are on a fishing boat and you are just going out and you are fishing. You're collecting the fish that you can. There is that inventory management where you're having to like fit the fish into this like boat shaped screen, and then bring those back to sell it to improve your ship and everything. And yeah, then there's like Lovecraftian horrors that are in the water and everything like that. But to your point though, the thing about like um uh where you can, where the consequences are low and everything like that, I think I only died in that game once. And when I did, all it did was just send me back to the last dock I was at, like, and it was super quick. I don't think I really lost anything or anything like that, and it was just like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna go back and do that again. And there, that game, while having like kind of a horror game vibe to it, was very relaxing, and like I just kept wanting to play it. It was really good.
Yeah, it's really interesting how um, looking at the art style, I could see those cozy elements you were talking about.
Hmm.
And then there was that moment in the trailer where I'm like, no, don't kill the octopus.
Well,
Like,
it's not an octopus. Like, it is.
yeah, all right, see, that's what I'm talking about. So for me, yeah, that wouldn't be necessarily my cozy game, but I think this is why it's so interesting. You know, I think that for some people, that frisson, if you will, of terror, but in a very manageable, controlled, capsule, if you will, is super enjoyable. And I think that Governor Explosion is just saying here, a recent discussion about liminal games being terrifying to some people and calming to others. Absolutely.
Yep.
There are also there was a couple of cozy games that dealt sort of, or at least could be cozy games that dealt a lot with grief.
Spiritfarer. That was one that we had
Spiritfarer.
talked about. Well,
Yeah.
and actually, I'm going to pull forward a question because I think this is relevant to it. Reaver01 earlier said, "Is there a general is there a general point where we should be aware of to look at what is happening in our lives instead of going to our cozy games, besides obvious issues of letting gameplay get in the..." Sorry, I misunderstood this. I thought he was talking... we'll get to that one at the end. I thought they were asking about, like, should you look at what's going on in your life when looking at what cozy game to play? Because I think that is relevant to Spiritfarer, where it's like, if you are having a hard time with, like, grief or death or anything like that, Spiritfarer may not be the right game for you at the time. But if you're further into that grieving process, Spiritfarer may be perfect for you, if that is what you are looking to get out of that. Because while the game is very bright and colorful and cozy, it does deal with grief and loss in very heavy ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that games that have a lot of heart and a really excellent narrative will bring things up for people.
Mm-hmm.
And what it brings up can be really affirming and beautiful and positively cathartic. And it's possible that for some people, it will be too much. So it is a really good idea to sort of consider a little bit around the game.
Mm-hmm.
A trailer or two or comments. There's r/cozy games on Reddit is actually an excellent resource. A lot of people will talk a little bit about a game, not in a spoilery way, but
Yeah.
in a way that gives you a sense of, okay, at this point in my life, is this a game I want to try?
Yeah.
Right? So my cozy game isn't always yours. And that came up with Firewatch as well, where some people considered it a cozy game, including you.
Yeah, well,
It's
one of those things where, like, at the time of playing it, there is kind of this ominous thing in it where you think that it's going to turn into a horror game, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah.
And and it was interesting watching people play that for the first time because they were expecting this twist. And so people at first were like, I don't really get this game. And then later on, when folks found it with more of and got more of an understanding ahead of time of what it was, I think it got a bigger audience. I really love that game. It's a lot of fun. It is a walking simulator, but I like those.
Yeah, I did find it interesting. I did find it enjoyable. I would have considered it a cozy game because I think I went through it with a sort of there was some dread there. So I think and a little anxiety. So I felt like because of that, it undercut. It was a good game. It was an interesting narrative, but it undercut my personal sense of what cozy is,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
Okay, so one of the other things that we had on here was specifically about handheld gaming.
Mm,
So what is it
mhm.
about playing these games on a handheld that works for you?
So for me, if I'm in front of my computer, which I am much of the day, I'm either working and doing my paperwork, what a joy, or I'm with clients. Um, it's not relaxed time, right? It's not my off time. When
Hmm.
I'm on the couch, sprawled there with a handheld, it's much more my physical sense is that I'm relaxing, and that also allows me to relax more in the game. So I guess it depends on what you're doing and what other things you might be using your PC or Mac or whatever for, your desktop, your laptop. So it might be that you don't want to play games on it, and it might be that you do. A lot of cozy games are in handheld formats as
Yep.
well, which I think that's one of the biggest lists out there that I found like on YouTube is cozy games for the Switch,
Yep.
right? And that's not a surprise, right? Or PS5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But mostly it's the Switch because I think the Switch does kind of have a lot of cozy games on it, and of course, um, your Steam handheld.
Well,
Damn it, I don't have one and I want one.
the before the show we were going through a list of
Oh.
games, and we found one, and I bought it, and I can't remember the name of it. What was it? My time in Portia, is that what
Oh
it was?
yes, my time at
Yeah. Yeah,
Porsche.
my time at Portia.
Yeah.
We found this game. I hadn't heard of it before. I looked it up on Steam. It was on sale, and I'm like, oh well, it's playable on Steam Deck. Bye.
And it's so cute. It's so cute. Yeah. So another game I like that really isn't what I would call a cozy game, but again, a lot of games that end up feeling very cozy seem to have cats in them, right? So a board game I really enjoy is Calico. It can be actually more stressful when you play it with someone because they might happen to get the puzzle pattern piece you really want, and they might do that on purpose, and you might basically like them a little bit less that day after you made them a very nice dinner. Won't
No
name
personal
names.
experience whatsoever.
Yeah. But playing Calico against the AI is really mellow, except that I definitely want to do it in a handheld because otherwise I'm sitting at my
Yeah.
computer and I'm like, so that's not super. But it is very cute. And so I think, again, this one feature of cozy games that I think stands out is like a sweetness about the art style.
Hmm.
However, whatever that is that appeals to you, that elicits a sense of warmth. Um, yes, cats baking. Exactly. Or you can dress up your animals or something, those kinds of things that are super cute. Not everyone is into building a house or whatever, but there's those elements again of growing, of building, of
Yeah.
creating that come up
Yeah.
over and over again. Yeah.
Well, one of the other things that we had on here was puzzle games. And
Hmm.
I actually realized during the show, I downloaded this game recently. It's just called Offline Games. And it's on iOS and Android, and all it is puzzle games. That's all it is. Like I can do this little like one with little vials where
Oh
you're matching the
yeah.
colors. I can do a number count one. Yeah, I want to continue it where like you're just adding numbers together and everything. And this has been my game that like I'm unwinding at night with. Or if
Yeah.
I was at the pharmacy yesterday and waiting for my prescription, I just sat there and played that for a little bit. And those Man, they scratch the brain well, where it's just like I'm focused in on this. I'm relaxing with it. There's very low stakes. I can restart a game whenever I want, and it's really nice.
Yeah, so let's talk about the put downable aspect of some
Yes.
of these games, right? Because I think that's what you're saying, in the sense that I can pick it up, I can while away a little time, I can bring down my anxiety and distract a bit from whatever is making me anxious for a little bit. And sometimes, of course, anxiety is the what if,
Yeah.
right? Where our mind goes towards catastrophizing sometimes, and it's not productive.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a good use of our time. Sometimes our brain convinces us that it's a good idea to look at this stuff over which we usually have no control.
Yeah.
But, preparing for the worst case scenario, I'm going to tell you, it's not. It's really not.
Yeah.
Because it actually interferes with your capacity to stay regulated and therefore come up with better solutions.
Mm-hmm.
The less regulated and more anxious, the less grounded I feel, therefore, the less grounded and useful my solutions might be. So if I instead have a way to distract in a put downable way, it's super helpful.
Yeah.
And games like that can just engage the mind a little bit. They're not so difficult that they're demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
They're not so easy that they're not at all engaging, right? There's that middle ground between slightly complex, engaging, but relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
right? From the simplest of like the colors in the vials and just putting them where they belong. Sorting, which in more complicated games kind of becomes part of inventory management, is actually a pretty soothing activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's just a tiny, it's not completely mindless, but it's engaging. And if you have pretty graphics to look at, it can really help.
Yeah. Well, I actually think that this ties into what Reaver's actual question was, which is there a general point we should be aware of to look out at what has been happening in our lives instead of going to cozy games, besides obvious issues of letting the gameplay get in the way of general living, working activity? So essentially, like, yeah,
Yeah.
that is kind of the thing. Like, what we're not saying that these games are a replacement for anything, especially therapy. This is, you've had a stressful day at work that it was a little bit more than normal, so you're relaxing in this way with this. This is not at all in means of like replacing what you need to actually do to deal with stress, anxiety, depression, or anything like that. These are things that can help, but they are not at all a solution.
No. However, what they are is a kind of signpost.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find that your life is getting more stressful and you therefore have less capacity to cope with things outside of the absolutely necessary, and what you're drawn to is cozy games, there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's like all you're doing and you're exhausted at the end of the day and you're not able to kind of tackle much, then it's like, yeah, maybe there's a lot that you're processing. And that's not a bad time to seek therapy.
Yeah.
Now, maybe there's a lot that you're processing. You've got all the supports that are around you, and really you're just getting through. Fair, right? People who are dealing with a bereavement know what's going on, might have supportive family around them, and might even be seeking therapy. And outside of that, it's just a matter of getting through in many ways.
Yeah.
Because there is a thing to which all you can apply is your capacity to just kind of cope and move forward and be there for those around you. There's nothing to change, in other words. But if there's a situation in your life that's making you unhappy and you have some power to create change, if you're not doing that and you're just taking your time and engaging in activities that are kind of an escape, then maybe that's not so helpful. And here I'm thinking of things like you have a job you really dislike. Now, you might be doing all you can to change it. You might be applying to other jobs. You might be focusing on training or retraining or just, other things. Absolutely, in your off time, cozy games, right? Or anything that's going to help you kind of wind down from the stress you're experiencing. But if it's like got you to a point where you're not doing any of those possible things that allow you to create change, then it's time to seek other kinds of help. A bit of career counseling, some therapy, something, right? So that you can bring about the change that you need.
Yeah. I think that is a perfect place to wrap things up for this one. Because yeah, I don't think there's any other better advice than that for this. Mitra, if people want to find you and what you do on the interwebs, where can they do so?
They can find me on the site that used to rhyme with fritter at Mitra Jordan.
It's a good description. Good description.
Yeah, because it got flattened.
It did.
Like a pancake.
Well played.
and also at mitrajordan.com.
Yeah, you can find me on those social media sites at the Treavor. There's an A hiding in there. Thank you all so much for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed our talk about cozy games. Hope you may have heard about some that you want to go check out now, or maybe even in the chat that you're looking into. But that is gonna do it for this week's episode of Champions Like. Oh, you know what? Because I've been doing such a bad job of it, I do want to give a shout out to Mars and Gabe and our moderators for the show. They've been doing a fantastic job. Thank you both so much for what you do.
Thank you so much. Yes.
But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Champions of Psych. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.